Yes, sir. There was a lot of misinformation, and I think that it was extremely distasteful for people to feel like they can attack our staff. I'm not in this position to be attacked on a daily basis. I mean, I was in the military. I know what it feels like to be attacked, and you can fight back. I don't think it's appropriate during this kind of crisis to take pot shots. And I want to share facts with the public, with the entire public. There are positions, public positions. There's some that even make twice as much as what I make, and that shouldn't be the issue. I mean, people work hard to get in these positions. The deputy city managers, back 3 years ago, I reduced them by three people. I don't know what the caller was referencing, where there was just one assistant. I never saw an org chart that just had one assistant. When I got here, there were 4 assistants. I reduced it by 3. The council directed that those deputies be put back in place. So we did that. The other thing that happened when I first got here, we cut the budget by $3.5 million, and the council at the time voted to put those dollars back in. The other thing that I want to make clear, because it was said that you weren't speaking about the food bank and dollars associated with that. The council, during this discussion, we said we're going to allocate $100,000 for the food bank, and we're matching the same $100,000 that the county is doing. The $1 million for businesses, the local businesses, we're partnering with the county, so there will be a total of $2 million with the LIFT fund, or the LIFT group, rather, that will administer those dollars. And that should bolster the efforts that the federal government is doing with the stimulus package. I said several times, as did Robert, and I guess it did not resonate, that the water parks, that we were not opening them up this summer. I said that, and it was due to COVID-19. I was very clear about that. Sam talked about what dollars have already been allocated for different projects, of which those are some. It would be, according to our city engineer, wouldn't be responsible to stop that construction in the midst of having to set up security or having to set up secure the area. However, if the public order, though, says that social distancing is required, that is not a necessity to be completed. So that could potentially cease depending on the public directive, the public health directive. In terms of streets, we said it several times that the dollars would go into the rate stabilization fund, and we did discuss that. Representative Hernandez brought it up. We mentioned it several times. Council had good discussion about that. I think it's a very good point. You know, if we don't look at ways like that, where there's revenue that's accessible like that, then we will look at cutting positions. We are not funding the arena with these dollars. I want to be very clear about that. That is in the legal court system. That was something that was done before any of you got on the council, before I came to the city of El Paso, and that continues to be something that's brought up by the public and a certain group that brings that up. And I'm not quarreling with them about bringing that up. They have their opinion, and I respect that. These dollars or anything we're talking about is not going towards the arena. The full complement of that bond has not been sold. There was a portion of that was sold in 2016. And that's all that's happened up to this point. The dollars that have been spent have come from the general fund for the legal fees. Want to be clear about that. Want the public to hear that. I also want to make sure that the public understands that the city's handling of this emergency is not to raise taxes. Our goal is to keep the budget where it is this year and attack the budget next year, because it's going to be difficult, like Representative Rivera talked about. It's going to be extremely difficult in next year's budget. And it's going to be difficult for our community as well. So we said several times that we're going to come back and make more recommendations to make sure that we meet any of the cuts that need to be made in order to balance the budget for next year. So we're very clear about that. The last thing I wanted to talk about is that the council in this action did not allocate any dollars for the design or construction of the MPC. I have told staff that we are not to do any expenditures for design or construction of the MPC until the council so deems appropriate, based on any court actions that take place. So we have not done anything relative to design or construction for the multipurpose center arena. The other thing I wanted to mention, there was a lot of discussion, a lot of mention made about the budget and managing the budget. Since 2014, we did talk about how the ballpark and what was done then was that there was $9 million that was spent from the general fund, from the fund balance, in order to make up different expenditures, and in addition to a lot of dollars that were spread throughout the city that were spent on different facilities in order to relocate the city hall into 4 different facilities. So I made that very clear to the council at that time. We also have sold or refunded several bond packages in order to save the city $21 million. We did that. We did that in order to balance the budget relative to the ballpark and what was done and what we inherited. That needs to be very clear since people are making reference to those points. We have increased the fund balance by $18 million. You could use some of those dollars, but we've already mentioned to the council how in the rating agencies want us to increase the fund balance because in 13 and 14, that fund balance was depleted by $9 million. So it's important for us to start adding dollars to the fund balance, of which we have. We've created these pay-as-you-go dollars that folks are now concerned about that were actually prioritized for these streets. They were prioritized for public safety. They did not exist before. So we did that. We put almost $3 million in the rate stabilization fund in this last year's budget in order to account for anything that we might encounter. We did not know we were going to encounter COVID-19. So we did plan ahead. This council was proactive. And I think it's important for us to talk about us being proactive and being able to be agile. And so people just can't make comments that are not accurate and are misinforming the public. These are facts that anyone is welcome to come see. You know, we've recovered dollars. I've talked about the MPO, almost $20 million and $19.2 million that was recovered. The 4 consecutive years with no audit findings. So we do have metrics. We do have key performance indicators, and they are worked. And I say this on behalf of the 6,000 employees that we lead. We have leaders that lead those employees. We also have 500. We have 500 middle managers that we talk to on a regular basis that help us lead those 6,000 employees. Finally, someone did talk about in the past in terms of the planning that was done. My experience in the cities that I've managed and the things that we look at, we've been focused on all these things that I referenced. One of the things that had never been done before, and those were audits for the motels in terms of tax collections. That had never been done before. And we collected $2.5 million that had never been collected before. So we brought in best practices that were never done before. We did Lean Six Sigma initiatives that our staff was trained to do and saved the city $6.5 million. So in training our staff, preparing our staff, leading our staff to attack all these initiatives was very, very important. So when people talk about, when they take pot shots, they're taking pot shots at our 6,000 employees. And for that, I do feel compelled to say what I'm saying right now, because it's important to share facts with the public and not just sit back and hear when people make up their own facts. I'm not going to sit back when people are just making things up that are not true. So I hope I cleared all of that up for people who are talking about all the different things that they mentioned. To be very clear, the council has not authorized and we have not recommended that we do any expenditures of any design or construction of the MPC at this time. And I think Robert Cortinas had some comments he wanted to add.
Yes, sir. Thank you. So one of the things that I just wanted to reiterate was that we are taking this seriously. Obviously, this is a situation that nobody expected to happen, nobody planned for, but we are in a much better financial position today than we were 5 years ago. The city manager ran through the list of all of the different areas, whether it's the fund balance, whether it's the pay-go funding, whether it's the refinancing of debt, that we are in a much better position today because of all of those things that the council has done over the last 5 years that is going to allow us to get through this challenge over the next 12 to 18 months or however long this situation occurs. One of the big things I wanted to point out also is that the recommendations that we have as far as the adjustments are focusing on the non-essential services. Quality of life projects. The city manager's said it multiple times already about the water parks and how those won't be opening. The delay in all the other projects that, whether they're in the design phase, that won't be opened. And so therefore we're going to recognize that savings and then push those projects back. We heard a lot of discussion from the public comment about the NPC. So we know that there's two sides to that, and that there's a lot of people that agree with it, a lot of people that disagree with it. I'll tell you, the city manager said it, but again, no debt has been issued on the NPC since 2016. So it's been almost 3.5 years. The city has no plans. We didn't issue debt for the NPC project. As I mentioned, the last 3.5 years, we have no plan to issue debt for the NPC for the foreseeable future due to the ongoing litigation. And so to say that there's any dollars associated with the recommended reductions or adjustments that are somehow tied to the NPC, there's not. And actually, there's no savings. The only area where we could see savings is if the lawsuit were to go away, which is not likely to happen. We talk about all the different priorities. So when you hear that taxes have increased over the last 5 years, I've shown you in budget updates, the tax rate has increased over the last 5 years, but we can point to specific examples and results that tie back to the strategic plan of where those tax dollars have gone. Whether it's looking at the operating costs associated with the 100+ quality of life projects that have already been completed, whether it's the addition of 150 new officers. You all have seen that graph many, many times of the depletion of our police force to the point where they were close to 1,000 officers, and now we're up to almost 1,200. That's a direct result of where those tax dollars have gone. The investment in our public safety. There was discussion earlier about the public safety capital, that PAYGO funding, that $4 million a year. Again, those tax dollars and those fees that were creating those PAYGO sources are going directly to those priorities identified in the strategic plan. One other point was looking at the ballpark. Obviously, yes, we know that the financing of the ballpark was not ideal. The timing of the ballpark financing, due to everything that was going on economically at the time, it was just a bad deal. But in the last 5 years, we've made that position a lot better. We showed you this past year, the general fund subsidy went down dramatically, and that was mostly due to the refinancing that we did a couple years ago, refinancing that balloon payment. There's also another opportunity for refinancing another portion of those ballpark bonds. So that's something that we didn't discuss today, but I've discussed that in the last couple of budget updates, that there's an opportunity again to alleviate some of the pressure from the ballpark and the need for the general fund subsidy that we're currently exploring. And so I think city manager summed it up really well, that just from a financial position where we were 5 years ago to where we are today, we're in a much better position to be able to address this challenge. Obviously, we're aware that we're trying to minimize the impact on services, every service, whether it's essential or non-essential. However, there's going to be tough decisions that need to be made not only now, today, in the next several weeks, but also as we start to develop the budget for this coming year. And so with that, I think Sam wanted to talk a little bit about streets and the commitment and what we're going to continue to do on the street side.
Yes, Mayor.